In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold. The Abracast, Occult, History, Conspiracy, and Violence.
It's that time again. The party is over, the fire is low, and all the normies have crashed, and we're the only ones left. Recording straight down the pillar of severity in the ritual space, far beneath the Stigmata Studios building located in the heart of the Steel City. I am John Towers, and this is the Abracast. So for this episode this evening, we have Anon Mess Age Sage on the phone. According to his Twitter bio, he is the devil. The greatest famous rock star of all time, and the world belongs to him. So Anon, welcome aboard.
Pleasure for me to be on the show. Thank you. And that intro is quite the intro, and it's all accurate.
All right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background here?
Well, basically, I've been living the rock and roll lifestyle. I take it pretty fucking seriously to the point where I get myself incarcerated from time to time. I've done 8 months in the county jail in Pittsburgh. Just got released, and I'm looking to play some fucking shows and make some more music.
Yeah, so we should mention that you're a local gentleman. You're right here in the same town. Of course, you can't come down to the studio because of the quarantine zones. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead and finish your.
Yeah, I've done several interviews. I've done. My name is out there. I get a lot of hate because I put myself out there and I say some controversial shit. So obviously, I'm gonna attract some negative controversy. It doesn't bother me quite too much because I have good self-esteem, but I definitely live. There's no joke behind it. People may call my bluff and say that I'm not, or I'm a fake or something, but it's.
Hello.
You hear me?
Yeah, man, you dropped off for a little bit. You were talking about.
Sorry, I put myself on mute by mistake. I accidentally hit it with my face.
All right, you were talking about people calling your bluff and calling you a fake about your rock star lifestyle.
Right, yeah. Well, they're just internet trolls and they're fucking losers, and that's what people do. They like to talk shit from a realm of safety, but these people would never say such shit to my fucking face because I've lived it. I've lived every way you can live the crazy rock star rock star life has got me in quite a bit of trouble. I'm not trying to fucking necessarily brag about all that, but it is true, and I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna put all the dirty laundry out there because I have nothing to hide.
All right. So, so tell me
Yeah, I figure
about,
honesty is the best policy. So
yeah. So tell me about your kind of religious background, because I know that you're interested in the occult stuff. So were you raised in a religious environment?
good question. Yeah, I kind of was. I mean, I'm pretty much like full. What do you call it? Ethnicity doesn't mean too much to me, but I'm pretty much like full-blooded Italian, and apparently, some of my relatives or what do you call it? Like great uncles or whatever they claim. A specific lineage. Who the fuck knows, really? It's kind of hard to find all that genealogy shit, but they claim like that we came from royalty and nobility and all that. It's probably true because I do have a noble side to me. But yeah, so yeah, there was Catholicism growing up, but for me personally, I'm very interested in the Roman pagan cult, to be precise.
Okay, like specifically like a Dionysian kind of thing or something like that.
Pretty much. Like there are many different aspects of that, so it's hard to just name one. There's the cult of Saturn. Every god has or goddess has its own cult, but I tend to be pretty reverent towards that kind of stuff because it's definitely real, 100%.
So
It often comes out in the music as well, unintentionally so.
Are you there?
Hello?
Yeah.
Do you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah, I thought you dropped off again. So is that where you would kind of describe where you're at spiritually now, as some sort of paganism or Italian heathenry or something like this?
I would say pretty much the old mystery schools that go back 2,000 years to the founding of Catholicism itself. See, I grew up with a Catholic background, but Catholicism itself is more like a proxy religion to me. So I treat Catholicism pretty respectfully in that regard from a heritage standpoint, but the real meat and potatoes behind the religion comes down to the paganism.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, when you look at those ancient myths and stuff, Catholicism kind of looks just like a fresh coat of paint on like an older sort of skeleton. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about?
Pretty much. I mean, 'cause I'm very interested in history, and Catholicism and the Roman Empire actually has quite a very, very interesting history. I mean, if you really get down to it and everything that happened, and then when Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the empire, there were so many traditions that were going back. You can even trace all the way back to the Etruscans, who were allegedly the first people of Rome, but you can trace them back to places like Troy, and then you can take it back to the Greco-Roman mythology itself, so you can take it back to the Trojan Wars if you really want to go back that far. And essentially, if you really want to go back even further, it all comes from Sumeria, which I'm also fascinated with for sure.
Yeah, so can you kind of talk a little bit about how Catholicism sort of reflects or builds upon those kind of ideas?
Well, you have to look at it from a historical standpoint because the religious practices of the day, what was going on in that time, well, basically the Romans were conquering everyone, and then they were assimilating everyone into their conquered territory. And there were a lot of other kinds of pagans, not quite the same. They were worshiping their gods from their own specific traditions. But what happened was that basically the tribes that were considered to be barbarian all basically coalesced into one tribe. There wasn't just one ethnic group. there were several ethnic groups, and they realized that they weren't organized enough, so they had to all put their heads together. Eventually their numbers did overtake and overwhelm the Roman Empire, and they physically conquered the Roman Empire, basically. But what happened was, a lot of people think that was the end of the story, but that was only the beginning, because they basically assimilated those people into their religion, because everybody wanted to be considered Roman back then. It was a sign of high social status. In the world, you were considered a pretty well put together person if you were a Roman. So everybody wanted to be a Roman, and the ancient mystery schools said, you know what, well, let's just take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, put it together, and they basically united all these various tribes with one new religion called Christianity. It was Constantine that came and basically did that because it made sense to him from a political standpoint, because he had a dream that if he would have done it, then he would win a specific war or specific battle. And he took that dream seriously. And then you get the origins of Christianity, and then you get because the Roman elite, they were never destroyed. They were never destroyed. What they did was they allowed the barbarian kings and chiefs to become rulers in their empire, and that's how you get the start of the Frankish rulers like Clovis and all of them, Dagobert, and all of those specific characters. And then eventually that became the Holy Roman Empire, and that branched out to be all the different monarchs of Europe that we now see. They can trace their ancestry, like the Queen and the Stuarts and the Windsors. They can all trace their ancestry to the original rulers of the like the Franks, like Clovis, and the start of the Holy Roman Empire is where it all goes to.
Yeah, and there's this there's like a Philip K. Dickian sort of kind of idea in like Valis, where he says the empire never ended. What happened is the Roman Empire turned into the Vatican, and that's why when you see in the medieval times, there are a bunch of kings and a bunch of empires, but eventually through political power, they all still answer to the Pope, you know, and the Pope just wields all this power. And so it's interesting. The idea is interesting. It's funny that we found it that these the Roman Empire just kind of, it struck its tent and it set up shop, and then it walked across the street and it set up its new tent and it traded its crown for a mitre, and it was like, okay, we're over here now, but we're still in charge of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
and then,
exactly.
Yeah, and then we see that echoing through, all of medieval history. You know, when we look at, we were looking at the Crusades last year, the first Crusade, and we're going to start looking at the second Crusade here pretty soon on the show. And you see these things where, like, the Pope just is like, hey, I got an idea. Why don't we go and fucking take Jerusalem? Or why don't we go and kill these guys? Or I don't like that these guys came up into our land, so let's do something about it. And then all these other kings are like, yeah, we can get behind that. And you're just like, oh, it's kind of like a puppet master kind of situation.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, because what really happened was that Rome stopped becoming a military force, and they put all their military force. They said, well, okay, you came into Rome, you conquered us. If you convert to our new religion, we'll make you a king in the empire. And that happened basically, I think it was Clovis was the first one. And that's how you get the Holy Roman Empire. But the people of Rome, the Italian peninsula, the word Italian, it dates back all the way to the word Italia. But Italy is a false concept, because it only became unified as a country of city-states in the 1860s. And prior to that, it was just, you had Milan, you had Venice, you had Rome, obviously, you had Naples, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies and all that. And you had all these powerful city-states, in Florence, obviously, and they were rolling people through, or they were acquiring all this massive power strictly, basically through banking. They were the original, some of the earliest bankers were Florentine bankers. If actually they were the original bankers, as we now know of the modern banking system. And but Italy stopped being a military power, and they basically gave that role to the Holy Roman Empire, which basically became the Germans for the most part. And that's why you had Hitler going crazy with the Third Reich and all that, because they were basically used to basically be the military force, because Germans were the tribe that eventually did conquer, and they are a very strong people militarily speaking, but they weren't the high priests. They weren't the original. The cult still stood there, and they were doing the bidding more or less.
Yeah, and they were the Germans took orders from the Vatican and Catholicism just as much as everybody else did. At the beginning of the Second Crusade, they were trying to rally a crusade to the Middle East, to the Holy Land, and the Germans looked towards Scandinavia and the Baltic region, and they're like, hey, we've been trying to deal with these fucking pagans up here for years. So instead of marching down to the Holy Land, why don't you let us march north up to the Baltics? And it became a kind of like an offshoot of the Second Crusade. Generally in history, it's called the Baltic Crusade. The one that I'm talking about specifically lasted from like 1144 to maybe 1146 or 47. But that kind of activity went on for many, many years, even after that, where these Germans would just roll in and try to subjugate and convert these pagans. But there was all sorts of political stuff going on too, because they were strong in trade. So even though the papacy was like, yeah, sure, you could go up there and convert these people, but don't make any deals with them. They either convert or they die, and that's it. Well, once they get up there and they start dealing with these people, all kinds of deals start to get made, because there was money to be made from that sort of thing, and letting those people survive instead of just slaughtering them. I'm not sure where I'm kind of going on that, except for the Germans taking the Teutonic Knights. They were back then, they were kind of like the Templars or the Hospitallers, but they were kind of invented just to go towards the Baltic regions to deal with these pagans, and they were marching on the order of the Pope as well.
Yeah, Germans are I mean this with all due respect to Germans, and it is a compliment, and I do love German people, but the church or the Latin establishment, whatever you want to call it, from any time, they always knew that the Germans, the Germanic tribes specifically, and that's where you get the when people say goth and they look at all the subcultures like heavy metal and industrial and all the stuff that I like. Well, if you take it back, really what it is, if you take it back to its origins, it all comes from, people don't just pull these things out of thin air. That's what I always say about everything. You are what you are. You may not know what you are, but you'll discover what you are. And a lot of what you are is in your genes. So when people were going crazy with all these subcultures and all of that, it basically just, it's part of their spirit, whether they realize it or not, and it comes out in the music. And that's basically that's what they learned, that they were a very powerful people, and it basically their customs can still be found today in the music scene, more or less.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right, well, let's talk about your music here. Do you does this paganism come out in your music, and if so, how?
Of course, there's a lot of it is just unintentional. It is basically stuff inherent into what I do, regardless. And 1 second here. It is inherent in the music, and it comes out without any deliberation or any kind of planning or thought. It just happens. And a lot of things I later see on recordings and tracks are things that I really have difficulty explaining, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your music. How would you describe it? Because I had trouble trying to describe it to my wife.
It is basically it originates in the Italian realm and called the pagan cults and all that, and it's basically carrying on that tradition. That's the way I see it, and that's the way I've come to understand it. It carries on that tradition of these secret mystery schools and what they were doing and all that stuff, and a lot of the mannerisms and stuff I see in the music itself and in the videos. It's reminiscent of, if you really get down to it, what these cults were doing and how they were practicing the religion.
Yeah, so the closest that I got to it when I was trying to explain it, it's probably just very surface level, but I was trying to explain it to my wife, and I was like, it's kind of like, it's like, you know, an Antichrist Superstar, like the droning that happens before and like after some of the songs, and she was like, yeah, I understand that. And I was like, it's kind of like that. It's a lot of layering of mood, it seems like, and it seems like you like the kind of the creepy vibe to it. Is that fair to say, do you think?
Right, I was for sure. I mean, if I were to give influences, Marilyn Manson happens to be one of them, but a lot of it is just really not based on that, but more just intuitive. And I mean, I've listened to all kinds, from noise to industrial to black metal to everything that you can possibly think of, and a lot of it just comes from, like I said, from an intuitive place, without thought or any planning.
Yeah, it's kind of like a abstract painting. And it's interesting that you were kind of talking about the kind of the Western mystery schools, because those guys in their initiations and stuff, they did rely on vibration and acoustics oftentimes. And you could find this sort of stuff in their in writings about these topics. And because it's so moody, it's like it kind of helps change your frame of mind or your attitude. It kind of makes you feel one way or another. So I think that it's interesting that you tie it to that.
Right. So how would you, from a gut instinct level, what do you think you're seeing when you're looking at it without really thinking about it too much?
Well, are you asking me what do I think that I'm seeing when I'm listening to it, or when I'm watching the video of it?
Both, more or less both.
Well, even though I'm an artist, I've always had problems with postmodernism and abstract artwork, and I kind of struggle to try to make sense of it, which I know is not the point of it at all. But so like when I'm watching a YouTube video of your, music, and you have like the shifting tonal colors and stuff. So,
Right.
I suffer from the same problem that everybody does, where I try to find patterns and things and stuff. So, I just look at it and I try to make sense of it. As far as the music is concerned, again, I'm not very sophisticated musically. I don't know a whole lot academically about music. I know what kind of music I like, and that's about it. But the same kind of, I guess I could say the same kind of thing about your music is, it's just I try to make sense of it, and the sense that I can make of it is that it's tonal and it's creepy, and it is like moody. It's kind of listening to the feeling of H.P. Lovecraft story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. You can definitely see a lot of stuff in that regard to it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so like Lovecraft spends a lot of time establishing mood. It actually seems kind of primary over to narrative sometimes, and that's kind of the way that I take your tunes.
Yeah. Wait. Say the last part one more time.
I said Lovecraft often spends a lot of time building mood in his stories, and sometimes I think it's actually primary over narrative to affect the mood of the story, and that's kind of what I
Right.
feel like when I'm listening to your music.
Okay.
Is that fair to say? Or
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm outside. There's like a fire alarm going on right now. I don't know.
No, it's cool. I'm like I said, and I keep qualifying it. Like, I'm not a musician, so I'm just trying to answer your question honestly. That's all. I'm trying not to offend you.
No, you're not. You're not. I'm outside. I just got caught off guard. It's really annoying. Actually, sorry to scream. There's a fire alarm. It's going crazy right now. Anyway, yeah, you're right on the spot. You're right on the money with that, though. It is all about the mood, 100%. And the mood, it comes out in the way that it does. And wow, that's crazy. Right now there's a fire alarm. It's insane. I'm surrounded. Like I just got surrounded by several people. Anyway, yeah. It is all about the mood and all that, and it comes out in a religious aspect.
So, speaking of religion, let's talk a little bit about this Christian website forum that I found about you.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so this person, I assume she's a lady, starts this thread by accusing you of being in the Illuminati and being a devil worshiper and all of this stuff. And the thread goes on for quite a little bit of time. What are your feelings on that?
Well, I've seen quite a lot. I don't know exactly what it is. I've seen quite a lot of stuff in that regard. People coming out with these bogus accusations and all this nonsense. I would have to see it personally to see what it really is. But it doesn't really surprise me whatsoever to see or hear of it.
So you weren't aware? You're not aware that it's out there?
No, not particularly. No.
Learn more at Abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at Patreon.com or Subscribestar.com.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, I just got caught off guard. There's so many people around me right now all of a sudden. But yeah, it's anyway, what's is there anything particularly about all those traditions you would like to know? Something in that regard?
Oh, about the Western mystery stuff?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, man. Go crazy.
Basically, I was sorry, I have to get out of here. It's crazy. So many people around me. It's insane. What the hell is this shit? Yeah, the mystery skulls and all that. Yeah, basically, it's comes out in that all those fucking things about the mystery schools. Basically, it takes us to where we are right now, if you ask me, about basically the what's going on in the culture right now as we speak. All right, I'm pretty much out of the way now. That was frustrating.
All right, so
that was frustrating.
Yeah,
I almost got like too many people.
Yeah, social distancing, people. Come on, get with it.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly.
So the way that I kind of understand the gist of the Western mystery tradition is after the Library of Alexandria burns, these guys sort of and it could be before that for sure, but they kind of these people that know these traditions and these sort of secrets, Gnosticism and so forth, go ahead and they go sort of underground and they make like a sort of like an invisible college. Is that the way you kind of see it?
Yeah, they do. They make basically an invisible college of all the traditions, and they carry on, and in like the church is like a proxy of all those ancient traditions, and but the traditions themselves, they're always there. They never went anywhere, and often it comes out in the alternative music.
Okay, well, yeah, so people see these Western traditions everywhere. You see them in the church, and for sure they're there. They're there. People see them in Freemasonry with their initiation and their symbolism. And I mean, when you look at both of those things, like there's definitely a link of some sort of sun worship in both of those establishments. But yeah, so it's interesting that you want to link it to music. Do you link it to music and pop culture, or is it just specifically like underground music, or kind of explain that to me?
Well, it depends what aspect you're talking about. If you're talking about well, yeah, it's all in the pop culture as well. You can see that as well, even if you watch like a popular music video or something of a popular artist. You'll see all the you'll basically see the same thing that you would see in the underground, but in a different way. Basically, not as overt, but it seems like it's getting more and more overt.
It does. It's like I did an episode right when the podcast started was when Gaga did her Super Bowl halftime show, and I kind of like did a breakdown of how it was a sun ritual. And other podcasters were out there talking about it was all about transhumanism and fucking robots or something or whatever. But it seems like it is everywhere. It's either everywhere legitimately, or people are using it as like advertising or some kind of social media meme. What's your take on that?
It's it is a social media meme and all that. But you're asking, do people take it seriously, or are they more or less just playing around with it?
Well, I was just kind of asking what your thoughts on it. I mean, you could split the difference and say there are some that are, and that there are some that aren't, or they all are, or they all aren't. You know, I don't know. I was just curious about your opinion on it.
What, like, can you be a little more specific?
Well, so like I mentioned, like the Gaga thing, or like Jay-Z walking around with. I mean, whether you consider Crowley a Western mystery kind of thing or whatever, but Jay-Z walking around with a "Do What Thou Wilt" t-shirt on, or Katy Perry doing like Egyptian rituals and like her fucking music videos and stuff like that. I'm interested because you said that you kind of are seeing it. There's sort of like a resurgence of it, not trying to put words in your mouth, in pop culture. And I'm just kind of trying to nail that down a little bit from your point of view.
Oh, there's definitely a resurgence of it. It's getting stronger and stronger. Like, if you remember basically the pop culture of the old times, like not the old times, but like the 90s or 80s, or even further back, you would see nothing like what you see now. You would see absolutely nothing, even similar to it. However, if you go to the current day and age, you'll see tons and tons of little subliminal things. And if you pay attention to the subliminal things, all of that stuff has a basis in somewhere. It comes from somewhere.
Yeah,
and a lot of it is tied to specifically basic, pagan occult traditions.
Okay. So okay, so can you give an example of the pagan occult tradition in modern pop culture?
Well, basically, you know how everyone says Illuminati this, Illuminati that, and all that stuff.
Yep.
Well, basically, that what they're calling Illuminati is they're misconfusing it for like the pagan. That style, that aesthetic. The like, if you pay attention and look at the music that I make, you'll see a lot of that style and that aesthetic, and its basis is basically in the Roman cult. So when people are saying Illuminati this, Illuminati that, they're misattributing things they don't understand.
Yeah, so specifically, the Illuminati was actually like a scientific group that was formed, and now everybody for some reason misconstrues it into some kind of Luciferian or satanic organization, and you're like, no, that's not what it is. It's not how it works.
No, well, I mean, no. What they're trying to they misunderstand it 100%. They it is a real thing, and then that 1776 story is basically just like a cover up. I mean, it's true, but it's not true. It's basically like see, what they're calling Illuminati does have its basis in those traditions. It's just that they don't understand it, and they detach the occult aspect from it. But a lot of it comes to basically the Roman cult. I mean, if you get down to it, and the 1776 story is, I mean, it's true, but if you take it back further and you get to the roots of it, you can basically tie it back to ancient Rome. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so you're talking about like the Manly P. Hall sort of story about how the Golden Fleece, mythological story of the Golden Fleece, was actually a reference to America, and like the golden apples of Heracles and this kind of thing. Is this what you're talking about?
Well, those things, that's just, Freemasonry. Freemasonry isn't really what they're talking about. Anyone can join a Freemason lodge.
Yeah, so the idea that Manly Palmer Hall, he wrote a book called The Secret Destiny of America, and in it he talks about this secret, I can't remember exactly what he calls it. It is like a secret order of unnamed philosophers that steered history. They steered these characters in history into discovering America and like ratifying the Constitution and doing all these things. So if it's not what you're talking about, it sounds like it lines up a little bit with it.
No, it is what I'm talking about. It's just that, see, all these different traditions, they all came out of basically nowhere as a way to sidetrack what was going on. Like Freemasonry, for example, is totally detached basically from what was going on with the what people were calling the Illuminati back then. Specifically, it was referred to a certain lodge of the Freemasons, the Bavarian Lodge, and which was a real lodge. But then people think that that's the true story. I mean, it is and it isn't. But like I said, it wasn't born out of a scientific Illuminism. It coalesced. There was some form of that did happen for sure, but that wasn't. If you trace it back, it all traced back. You can take it. You could take it to the Los Alumbrados, which is the name, which it was a secret Spanish order that's basically passed on its name to become the Illuminati. And Illuminati itself is an Italian word too, so that should tell you something.
Yeah. Yeah. So where have you come across this idea that America, specifically the Michigan region, supplied the raw materials needed for the European or the Mediterranean Bronze Age? Have you run across this theory before?
The Bronze Age.
Yeah, like they came over to get the ore. So someone like Phoenicians specifically, or later on, that secret was passed to to the Greeks perhaps, and they figured out
exactly. That is true. They figured
out how to navigate.
Sorry, go ahead.
They figured out how to navigate here to get the raw materials to create all the bronze for the Mediterranean Bronze Age. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Mediterranean Bronze Age. That's what I was saying about the Etruscans. If you take it back further, you take it to Troy. From Troy, they basically came from the Phoenicians and part of the what was considered to be the Babylonians. And if you take it back even further, you can trace it all the way back to the Sumerians.
Yeah,
and that code, and it all ties back to that. But it's basically the same tradition being taken from one area to another area to another area to another area.
Yeah, and so the idea
that's what it becomes.
Yeah, so the idea would be that the Greeks would have preserved the knowledge on how to get to America from the Phoenicians, and then the Italians or the Romans would have got it from the Greeks, and then the Romans encoded it.
That class of people, they basically they never died, and if you if you trace it all the way back from Rome, well, basically those people came from Troy, which was basically fighting with Greece as we now know it, and basically you can trace it all the way back. That's why it's called the Greco-Roman mythology, because you can trace it all the way back to ancient Greece as well. It's basically the same high priests. They just went from one area to another. And if you trace it back far enough, you trace it back to the Sumerians.
Yeah, and so that's what Manly P. Hall does in that Secret Destiny of America, is he traces it. I mean, I don't think he goes as far as to say that where the Bronze Age, all that Bronze Age stuff came from, but he traces it from the Roman mythology, the codes in the Roman mythology, to basically he claims that Christopher Columbus was actually a Greek, and the Italians and the Spanish, or whatever, the Italians and the Spanish paid for his trips to come over, and he actually knew where he was going because he had these old maps from, this whole lineage from behind, and this is how the cover story for the discovery of America happened. And the reason I keep bringing that up is because you keep talking. Well, you were talking about the 1776 story, which I'm fascinated with, and I've done many episodes about that. So yeah, that's why I keep going back. I was trying to connect those two ideas for our conversation.
Yeah. Well, what do you specifically think about it yourself?
Well, I don't know. Like, it's fun to think that there is this organization of philosophers guiding mainstream people to discover America, and then them guiding like the passage of the Constitution and all this stuff. Like, that's a fun idea. I actually wrote about it in one of my books. So yeah, like, it's fun to think about. It's impossible to prove either way, like most things, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you take always look at the symbolism of things. Always pay attention to the symbolism. If you pay attention to the symbolism, then you can see basically everything for what it is. And that's what I was more or less saying about the popular culture. Just they may not come out and say exactly what it is, often because they don't know what it is. But if you look at the aesthetic and the style of it, like for example, the Guy Fawkes mask. You know what that is?
Yeah. From well, I was about to say from V from Vendetta, but it's actually from the Gunpowder Plot, and
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, basically, that mask itself, I mean, if you see stuff like that, if you ever see that mask, it's obvious you're talking about the Roman cult and Roman paganism, because they used to wear masks and they still do. That's what the religion's about. It's there's an animalistic totem aspect to it where they would dress up as animals. Like, that's a basically it's some kind of bird that mask is supposed to be, and they would have many orgies and they'll fuck each other. So if you look at, all you have to do is just pay attention to the symbolism. It all goes back to these like you were saying earlier, the Dionysian cults, which is basically it was all based on frenzy and orgy and fucking
they call
all this excessive partying, basically.
Yeah, they call it ecstaticism. Where you get riled up, and next thing you know, you're killing your husband, so you go out and grind scissor with your the lady next door. They had to go wander around out in the woods chasing the god of wine and to have sex with each other.
Right. Yeah. And that's basically where all the music comes from. It's a celebration of that, because that's my true religion, and that's it comes out in the music, and a lot of it is homage to certain spirits, guardian spirits and stuff like that, and it bleeds in the music.
Yeah, so the one thing, when you initially approached me to come on the show, the one thing, because like I've stated a million times already, like, I'm not very sophisticated as far as music's concerned, but what I do know is that a lot of musicians like Aleister Crowley, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on that. Like, we already mentioned Jay-Z wearing a Do What Thou Wilt, and the Beatles had a portrait of Crowley on the Sgt. Pepper album, and there's obviously some Thelемite references in Marilyn Manson's work, which you've already stated was a impression on you. So what do you think about Crowley's influence in music and modern pop culture, perhaps?
Well, I think in modern pop culture, I think a lot of people would say, like, how Jay-Z has to do with that Wilt T-shirt. I saw that as well, and a lot of people are just trying to look cool, but they don't really understand. And Crowley himself was really interesting, but he wasn't that interesting. I mean, if you really get deep down to it, but you still have to respect him, because basically what he did was bring those traditions that were hidden. He basically brought it into the public scene, the mainstream and all that. And then you have rock and roll basically taking it further, and then he basically did a good job in important work, I would say, for sure.
Yeah, so I do this when I do Crowley books on the podcast. I never ever dive into his personal life, because there's plenty of podcasts that do that. I talk more about his actual what he wrote. I actually don't even get into like the Diary of a Drug Fiend and that kind of stuff. Like, I stay on his actual, I don't know, like his actual day job, like like his actual work on Thelema and magic. So I'm always interested about how people take it, especially folks that are kind of in the know, like you are, obviously, and you know, I'm always looking for that point of view because I find it interesting. And then when I do bring it up, I find it interesting how many people are oblivious or only know like, oh yeah, he summoned a demon at Loch Ness or whatever, or, you know, or he had an orgy in the Great Temple of, or the Pyramid of Giza. They only know like the stories and they don't know the text.
Right.
All right then.
You caught me in a. I'm surrounded by like people are acting fucking crazy during this coronavirus. Like I'm outside right now and there's fucking people everywhere. It's the craziest fucking thing. Is it not the fucking craziest fucking thing you've ever seen in your life? How's it where you're at?
Well, I've been locked in my studio now for a number of days, but I did have to go out to Walmart today, and the amount of people walking around with rubber gloves and masks was alarming. Yeah, so I don't know where you come down on this coronavirus thing, but my kind of take on it is that it's serious. We need to pay attention to it, but at the same time, the media is totally overblowing it and creating this panic. That's kind of where I am on it.
Oh, to fucking say panic is a fucking understatement. I can't fucking stand this. It's insane. It's insanity. Fucking, I've never seen people act this fucking insane in my fucking life. So that's why this whole interview has been basically me like halfway trying to fucking dodge all these crazy fucking situations and fucking people. It's insane. Have you been walking outside?
Yeah, like I go outside occasionally, and my regular commitment has me listed as a partially essential personnel, so I get to travel 2 or 3 days a week. My wife, however, hasn't left the house in like 10 days, and I'm really worried about her mental health. But listening to you run around while on the phone reminds me of that scene from Fight Club where Jack's running down the street in his underpants with the telephone. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, so you have been seeing a lot of the nonsense.
Yeah, there's a lot of nonsense.
Well, how are you handling people during this insanity?
Well, like my pharmacy has 6 feet increments taped to the floor, so I'm able to recognize that and be like, oh, I'm not supposed to be closer than this to people. And then I'm also like a handshake guy. So I've also learned that people are hesitant to handshake. So I'm trying to just be flexible and agile in dealing with it. I'm not raging against it in any way. I'm trying to remind folks that it's important to get away from their TV and their news for a little bit every day, because that shit is I believe it's driving people insane. I'm actually worried more about mental health right now than I've ever been worried about it in my life, which
it's crazy.
It's saying something if you personally know me. So how about you? Like, you're wandering around outside on the streets of Pittsburgh right now. Like, how are you dealing with it?
Really, to be honest, I'm super fucking irritated about it. It's insane. I can't even, I've never seen, like, what the fuck? It's like everything happened. It's like you can't make this up. Like, everything that fucking happened was a fucking fire alarm. All these people come running the fuck out as you're trying to ask me these questions. And I'm like half giving, like, my responses. I'm not trying to be rude, but I can hardly hear. It's like a mob mentality. People are freaking out. What the fuck is this? And it's basically just all this fucking paranoia and just absolute fucking mental retardation. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Well, once this whole thing settles down, we'll get you back on. We'll get you on where you can get like a secure area so you're not wandering around out in the streets, and we'll tackle some more of this information. How's that?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I could even I could also do another one with more in-depth answers. I'll be pretty like away from all this fucking not human tragedy pretty soon.
Well,
since
yeah,
it's in fucking insane.
yeah,
Crazy.
So we're gonna wrap up here, but why don't you throw down some of your plugs? What you're plugging? If you got any shows coming up, your YouTube channel, perhaps. So go ahead and throw those down, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Basically, the YouTube, basically T-shirt. Buy the T-shirt. You can find all these things. I'm in the process of planning a fucking tour, but it's really fucking hard, as you can probably tell, because of how people are fucking acting about this coronavirus.
Yeah, I know. Like my interview schedule just got a major shakeup because of this. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah. Basically, just the moral of the story: fucking worship the devil and fucking have fun. And to be honest, I think we're in the beginning stages of the apocalypse. That's what I believe, and I say that just how fucking people are acting, and it has to be the fucking apocalypse. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I pointed out the other day that we have a locust infestation in Africa right now. We have a plague here. We have these wars going on in the Middle East. Like, all we need is like one additional thing. Like, we just need like a dinosaur with 10 heads wandering out of the ocean, and we pretty much got all of our bases covered.
Yeah. And it may actually happen. I mean, just all this human isolation is. It should be startling to someone who's trying to look at the situation honestly. It should be a little fucking astonishing and startling, because it's not necessarily the disease itself. I'm not really worried about that. I'm just worried about the way people are reacting. I mean, I can't even go out fucking side without just like seeing insanity.
Yeah.
Just total insanity. And if this paranoia gets worse, I can only fucking imagine what it's going to be like.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get off into a big story, but yeah, like it's rough. And that's why I've been telling everybody, I've been begging listeners and stuff to get away from their TV for a little bit, unplug from the media, regulate your blood pressure a little bit before you log back in and start going through your feed. Facebook and Twitter have become like even more of a dumpster fire than normal. It's politicized. Whatever side you're on is like raging, bloody, like hemorrhoid volcanoes. Like, I mean, it's stressful.
Oh yeah, well yeah,
the
censorship and all that shit is fucking nonsense, and all it's doing, like they always say, oh, white nationalists. Well, guess what? You're creating legitimate white nationalists, because people are so fucking like sick to their fucking stomachs of hearing all this politically correct jargon. No one wants to fucking hear it. So you're creating legitimate white nationalists. You're making them. You're creating them because no one wants to hear it. So they're going to go to the extreme opposite side, and that's what I see happening now. And I believe it's going to happen more so in the fucking future, because all that 4chan culture, it's basically slowly but surely bleeding onto the mainstream. But it's not really fucking just 4chan. It's like the entire deep web is slowly creeping up and slowly taking over, and pop culture is becoming more and more dark and more and more dark and more and more dark. That's why I say we're probably in the fucking start of the apocalypse. I mean, like, we're getting pretty damn dark. How much dark can you get? How much more dark can you get is the question.
Yeah, so, well, I think that I am a little bit older than you. So to me, this feels like home. Like I'm, yeah, I grew up in the end of the Cold War. So I'm used to feeling like the end of the world is just around the corner. I'm used to feeling like the bombs are going to drop at any time. So to me, I'm kind of like detached from that, and I'm looking at the media and being like, you motherfuckers are the problem. And I think I think this is teaching a lot of people that lesson. I don't know what you what do you think about that? Do you see like a schism
About what?
about the idea about maybe in the future Americans will be paying less attention to the media because of this?
Probably people will become more savvy. Like, for example, when I went to jail, I got in some race riots. Not joking. There is no such thing as political correctness in jail. You will have people scream the word at black people, and there will be fights over it. And I got caught in a lot of in that shit. And that's just the moral of the story. When you come back to regular life, you see that people are so uptight, and you think like, wow, you never really went through anything in your fucking life. And that's what I was saying about the trolls. Like, these people would, I don't wish this, but they would get mercilessly fucked up by like somebody who really wanted to prove.
Hey, I think you hit the mute button with your face again. Hello? I think you hit the mute button with your face again.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Actually come down to the studio and hang out.
Yeah, sure, I definitely will. It'll be